Hey everyone, this is Christopher Luxon, the former CEO of Air New Zealand.
This is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire.
This is Tracy Ibarra. I'm in Executive Solutions at Dell Technologies.
This is Travis Chappell, founder of Build Your Network. If you are wanting to learn how to embrace change,
To navigate through disruption as a leader,
then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast.
The Leadership is Changing podcast.
the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend,
my very good friend, Denis Giannoutsos.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis Giannoutsos.
Hey, welcome to the show, Leadership is Changing. What we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Leaders everywhere confront similar obstacles because people are people, but everywhere you go, leaders are overwhelmed, disrupted, and under pressure. They run from email to email, meeting to meeting. Many leaders are not changing quick enough, which means they run the risk of becoming irrelevant and being left behind. The purpose of the show is taking our listeners' leadership to another level by finding their balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. I believe we don't have enough effective leaders in the world today, and if we can get the leaders to step up and lead change, then they can inspire real change. Hey listeners, it's now time to adapt in our fast-moving world, and I want to welcome you to today's Ask Denis episode, which is a freestyle episode. Now, before I go any further, I just want to invite you, if you haven't already done so, to the Facebook group and LinkedIn page, Leadership is Changing. We have those two different platforms whereby we have a forum, a community of people who share their thoughts and insights in relation to leadership, change, and the like. So we'd love to see you there, so feel free to come along and join us. As I said before, welcome to the Ask Denis episode, which is a freestyle episode. This is where I'm asked a question by our listeners, or I share my thoughts, insights, and experiences from working with many leaders around the globe. Hey listeners, I want to welcome you to today's session. Today's topic is really about recognizing that taking a break is critical. And it's really quite interesting to see what we talk about here, because you see, leaders across the globe are physically, mentally, and emotionally tired. You know, with the pandemic in the last 12 months and the lockdowns, and many countries still in those lockdowns, some of them are coming out of it, and some, of course, going through vaccines. But what we've seen is that leaders are really, really tired, and they've been struggling, and so there's been several reasons why. Well, one thing is that their transitions going from the office or from home to the office and then back home again have been missing over the last 12 months. The transitions from going from the bedroom to the bedroom for many of them, because their offices in the bedroom has not been that easy. Going from the bedroom to, say, the kitchen or the lounge is one thing as well, but it hasn't been that easy. Then they're realizing that they're working all day and they're on meetings, and next minute they look up and it's 2 p.m. they still haven't even had lunch. Then they go, don't worry, I'll just do one more email, one more meeting, and then they realize at 7 p.m. at night they still haven't even had lunch. For some of them, they're doing this day in and day out, and they're just very, very tired. For those countries who have come out of lockdown and have been moving back into the office, maybe in a hybrid situation whereby they may be coming in 3 days a week or 2 days a week into the office, they're finding it hard to get their staff back into the office. Some of the employees are wanting to stay at home, continue to work from home. A lot of these leaders are being rocks to their team. In other words, they've been supporting, they've been there, they've been showing a brave face to their employees. But here's a question I've got for you, listeners, and I've also got for leaders in general. Well, one question is, when was the last time you had a decent break? Now, when I ask this to many leaders, they go, some of them actually say to me, hey, Denis, can you define to me what you mean by a decent break? That just in itself tells me that they haven't had a decent break. Yes, they may have 2 weeks off, but and I know, that we need to be a little bit realistic. What do I mean by that? Well, for a lot of people, even though they have 2 weeks off, they're not really 2 weeks off because they reach for their phone, they check their emails, their text messages. Some of them go onto conference calls as well. So, most of them have never had a decent break throughout their career, let alone in the last year. They've always been on. So they're always clearing emails throughout the night, even though they might be with family, and on the weekends. They're always taking phone calls. And they run the risk of being burnt out. Why? Because they are always on. And so it's quite interesting to see what we need to do and how we actually can take a break. Recognizing that you need to take a break is critical. Because for many people, they don't even recognize that. They're not even acknowledging the fact that they need a break. It'll be fine, I'll just keep on working through, is their attitude. And they are finding it hard to even say no. Some are confused because they're working from home, even though it's been for 12 months. That means that they're not even taking a break. And I mean a holiday break. And this is limited due to the fact they're in lockdown. But because they're still at home and they're working from home and they're living at home and everything's all at home, they're not actually taking a decent break. Now, that could be 1 week off, it could be a few days off, it could be a few weeks off. But they're tending not to do that in particular because of lockdowns. You see, COVID and the lockdowns and the pandemic that we've had is actually forcing people to really think and review their careers. Some people are just throwing their hands up in the air and saying, enough is enough. I've had enough of the corporate world, or I've had enough of this business world. I want out. Some are thinking that I just want to go and do a total career change and go and do something totally different again because they want change, but they just don't want to be doing what they've been doing. The COVID side of things, the pandemic, has really forced people, some of them, to actually make decisions that have been putting off for a long time. Things like going and starting a business, maybe going and buying a business, maybe going out and doing some further study, maybe just going and spending more time with their family. So how do you take a break? How do you recognize that it's time for you to take a break? Well, recognizing it and actually understanding you need to take a break is where probably it could be caused by several things. One could be the behavior and the way that you are and the way that you react to people and the way that you may be snapping at people. Another one could be around performance, productivity. Are you meeting the deadlines or are you struggling to meet the deadlines? And I'm not talking by the fact that A, you don't have the skills, or B, that you don't actually have enough resources. It's just that you're tired. Is it also the fact that I haven't had 2 months off? Do you want to have 2 months off? Because some people say they just can't afford to take that time out. Sometimes we just need to turn off. And so when you recognize the fact that you're always on and that people are talking to you, but you're not actually even present with them because you probably are focused on emails, text messages, and social media and so forth, then it's probably time for you to take a break. So how do you take a break? What are some things that you might need to do to put in place? Well, the first thing I think you need to do is you actually need to recognize the fact that you do need to take a break. Number 2 is you probably need to acknowledge it, that you are wanting to, or you're needing to take a break. The third thing here would be around boundaries. If you had the ability to say no in a constructive way, do you think that might actually help you? For a lot of people, they're not sure on how to say no. It's just yes, yes, yes. And then more work and more work and more work and more things are being piled on top of them. Saying no to meetings that you probably don't even need to attend. Saying no to some projects that you probably don't even need to be involved in. It's not you being abrupt or being nasty in the way that you're saying no. It's just that you could actually ask questions like, is there someone else that could be doing this? The other area would be around delegation. How many of you actually do that very well? I know a lot of leaders actually are scared to delegate because, well, I want to feel like I'm involved. Or some leaders don't want to delegate because they think they can do the job better. But if you can delegate really well, then what will happen is that it will free your time up to go and do and work on probably some strategic things that you need to be doing. It probably also would mean that you'll be able to take a break and really set other people to do things. You see, if you're delegating, you're really setting yourself up for a succession plan of having people who can actually step in to do your role in the future. You see, team, as leaders, that's what our job is. We're here to empower others, to enable others, and to delegate to others to allow them to grow. You see, for you, a lot of you as leaders today, you are where you are because of the opportunities through delegation that you got given, and possibly the second piece, which is making mistakes and learning from those mistakes. Team, the other thing too would be you don't actually always have to just go away on holiday or take some just big breaks, decent breaks as I call it. Sometimes you just need to take some regular breaks throughout the day. Taking times out to go for a walk, go out for a coffee. Just go and take some time out to have a break and get away from the computer, get away from the work that you might be doing, getting out and maybe getting some fresh air by walking and getting the blood flowing, which would be great. Here's another thing that's quite good as a tip. If you were working in the office and you tended to leave on a regular basis at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m., whatever time it is for you, well then when you're working from home, maybe you need to leave the office even though you're at home. Just take the same time zones as you've been working as if you're out at work. But log off. In other words, take the computer or the laptop and log off completely. That forces you to do it. You see, because if you don't, after dinner or before, once the kids have gone to bed or something like that, it's just easy to quickly check your emails again. The next minute, you're there for another 2 hours. If you log off, it's a little bit harder to start your computer up. It's a little bit harder because as if you've closed the shop and you're done for the day. So log off to turn off. If you can do that, that'd be really cool. The other thing I would say here is, for a lot of people, they use a lot of excuses. I know, but I'm really busy and I'm going to get things done. Or I know, I'm just going to do one more meeting, or I'm going to do one more thing. Team, a lot of that becomes excuses after a while. And if you can actually own it and work this and be disciplined around what you need to do to make sure you are recognizing that you need to take a break, then please go ahead and do that. Because one of the most critical things that you can do today is understand when you need to take a break and actually then do it. Too many people talk about it, but they don't actually do it. And it's really important for you and I to make sure that we are taking these regular breaks. And I tell you what, there's a fantastic book out there, and I've talked about it in other episodes, but it's The Power of Full Engagement. And if you can get a copy of that book, read it. Because they talk about the energy tanks in there. How many of you around 3 p.m. in the afternoon, you are flatlining in those energy tanks? Because when you wake up in the morning, your energy tanks, batteries, if you want to put it that way, have been replenished to a certain level. It's really determined on the level or the quality of sleep that you've had that will determine how well your energy tanks have been refilled. Now, when you go back to work, that's why you're feeling really quite fresh. But by 3 p.m., for a lot of you, you are reaching for chocolate, coffee, carbs, and things like that to give you the power, the energy to take you through to the end of the day. But then from some of you, you've got to go home. You've got to be a mum, you've got to be a dad, you've got to be a partner, you've got to be a brother, a sister, uncle, auntie. So you've got other roles to fulfill. But you're already flatlining at 3 p.m. And so we've got to really be mindful of our energy tanks and the way that we're actually working there and what we're doing there to help us. So team, recognize that you need to take a break and that it's critical that you do it. If you don't, you run the risk of burnout. And you go and ask anyone, you do some research and ask people who have experienced or themselves or they know somebody else who has gone and experienced burnout. How long does it take to come back? You'll hear answers like 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and you may even hear that some people didn't even come back. Burnout is not nice. And for a lot of people, for a lot of you right now, you are very, very close to burnout. You may be already at the dysfunctional phase in what you're doing, but you know what, team? You can fix this. If you recognize that taking a break is critical. Hey team, if you haven't already checked out the Facebook group or the LinkedIn page, Leadership is Changing, feel free to go ahead and do that. This week we also released some mashup, and the mashup being that we've actually taken some snippets from other podcasts, or episodes I should say, throughout the last 10 months, and we've created some episodes around that, one episode 137 and 138. So if you haven't already checked out those mashups, go ahead and do it. Mashup 137 was talking about who was your favorite leader, and we had 4 superb guests on that. And then the 138 is about Leadership is Changing, and that's the name of this podcast, of course. When you hear that, what does that mean for you? And we've had some superb guests share in that mashup as well. So if you haven't already checked out the Facebook group or the LinkedIn page, go ahead and do that. And if you haven't already checked out the mashups, episode 137, 138, go ahead and do that as well. Hey listeners, what we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Change is incredibly scary, especially the unknown and the unfamiliar territory. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing. Hey, look out for the episodes as they've been released. Download them, have a listen, put a review and a rating, and share them with your family, your friend, your network. If there's any feedback you'd like to give me about the show, or if there's a question you have for me for my guests as I interview them, or if there's a question for the Ask Denis Freestyle episode, feel free to send me an email, dennis@leadingchangepartners.com. Hey listeners, thanks for tuning in today. It's always great to have you here on the show with us. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.